Hello and welcome back. I'm Sarah Liz, and today we are making a purse card, or maybe just a purse. I watch Craft Roulette religiously, and for weeks, maybe months now, the project purse card has been feared and vetoed. And I was like, how hard would it be to make a purse card, purse pocket? Anyway, this is it. I've made a few already just to kind of see what my dimensions were and how I wanted to put it together. But we're going to make a fancy one today. We're starting with a piece of heavyweight cardstock. It is 7.5 by 9.5 inches long. And we are going to score that along the short edge at 1 inch and 6.5 inches. So you'll have a 1 inch section on either side. We're going to rotate that to the long edge, and we're going to score at 4.25 and 5.25. Essentially, you could change the dimensions, but you want the strip on the long sides to match that strip down the middle. So I've made a little template here, and I've sort of marked off in dark black where we're going to cut away some sections of this, but we also need to add 2 additional diagonal score lines. I'm just using an old pen that doesn't actually work anymore, and I'm scoring from the top 1 inch down diagonally to the edge where it meets that first score line. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side from that top 1 inch score line toward that first score line right at the edge. Next, I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to fold and burnish this really well. I'm using 110-pound cardstock, even though I'm adding layers, because apparently I can't make something without hoping it will last 100 years. Do you do this? Do you make your cards and paper projects so that they'll be indestructible? I don't know. Anyway, so you can kind of see how this purse will fold up, and we're going to cut away 2 sections. And I've sort of scribbled off, it's just that little rectangle from one corner score line to the other. And you'll see we have this little flap that's left. We're going to do a pretty steep miter on that. It's not quite a triangle point. I want to leave enough so that there's something to really glue, but it is going to narrow significantly towards the top of the purse. So I'm cutting that away on both sides and then just mitering in. So we've got that little flap. That'll make sure that nothing's going to fall out of the bottom of our purse. And again, you can kind of see I'm going to fold that up, and here's the flap that has the diagonal score line. When I have a score line like this, it's not as deep as if I had used my scoreboard. So this is actually a pretty terrible ruler. It's hard to see the measurements, but it's really sturdy, and I butt that right up against the score line I made with my pen that doesn't work. And I'm folding the opposite way, right? Normally we fold away from the score line, but it wasn't deep enough that I could see it on the back. So I fold it first toward the score line, and then I'll fold it back and away. And when I use my bone folder and go in here, that piece down at the bottom is a really narrow piece of paper. So I'm being really careful in there so I don't lose any part of it. Next, this is my good ruler. I'm marking at the halfway point. So the front panel of this purse is an A2. So it's 5.5 inches along this side. So I'm marking at 2 3/4 of an inch because I want to add a couple of magnets to create a closure at the top. You don't have to. This is totally optional, and you could skip this step. But you know me, I love a project with some magnets in it. I'm going to use, it's just a regular old hole punch, and I'm holding both sides together so I can make sure the holes are going to line up exactly when the purse is closed. Next, we're going to glue this guy together. I'm using a liquid glue here. You could use double-sided tape, but it's not very forgiving. And the side flap isn't going to line up neatly along the bottom. There's going to be a little piece we have to clip off. So again, I really like my liquid glue for this. And I like, this is the Nuvo Delux adhesive in particular. It has a quicker grab than Barely Art, which I also like. And I want this to grab fairly quickly. When we go to make sure all of those pieces are pressed down and the glue is secure, I need to be able to get inside of this to manipulate it a little bit. And if I don't have a quicker grab, the whole thing falls apart. Ask me how I know. So I'm squeezing very gently from the side, and I'm going to use my bone folder, and I'm going to get in there and I'm going to press down on that tab to make sure that the glue is good and stuck down. And then you can see on the bottom, there's just a little bit of an overhang. You could have lined it up so it was flat along the bottom, but then you have one of the angles is 90 degrees and the other one is very acute. So this created a more even set of angles. On the one I'm showing you for decorating, I just inked over a single piece of paper with some black ink and then stenciled over top of that. So it would have been like a one layer purse. But we're going big on this one. I have embossed 2 A2 panels of black cardstock with an embossing folder. It's not a 3D embossing folder, but it does give a really lovely impression. I think it's a Spellbinders. I'll link it below. And I am going to use my construction glue on the front of this. I love this glue. It's the Becon 3-in-1 for embossed panels, because it really gets into the nooks and crannies of it. But because it's a solvent-based glue, it's not adding moisture to the paper. It's not warping it. Next, I have 2 little rectangles of black cardstock. They're 1 1/4 inches by 3/8 of an inch, only because I used a die from my Lawn Fawn Flippy Floppy to cut them, but it was the perfect size. I'm scoring them in half. These 2 pieces need to be wider on the thin edge than your hole punch, because it's going to sandwich that magnet in there. I know some people are sort of hesitant to use these magnets, especially if they have little kids running around. I always make sure mine are fully enclosed and they're not going to come out. I took my hole punch and punched through those embossed layers. And again, instead of adding the magnets, you could just add a ribbon at the top and that would work really nicely. I actually kind of love this silvery ribbon going through the top. I'm using, these are 1/4 inch magnets from Total Element. And I'm going to take this little piece of cardstock and I'm just going to glue the backside, the inside of it. And it is wider than that hole. So I want to make sure it's kind of centered and that magnet can't come out. Because we have 2 thick pieces of cardstock, one of them is embossed even, that magnet is so thin. I wiggle it and it snaps in there and it is flush with the cardstock. So there's no bump or anything to kind of indicate that it's in there. And then I have 2 pieces of ribbon and I don't know, I didn't measure them. I'm just kind of eyeballing to see how big of a loop I want. This is going to be what you use to pull the magnets apart. And I'm going to cut them both the same length and use my lighter just to seal the ends, because one of those edges will be exposed. So I'm adding glue both to the purse front and then to that little black flap, because that's going to sandwich over the ribbon. And then I'm going to fold the ribbon up over the top with a little dot of glue. And I am just going to clamp down on that with my reverse tweezers and give that some serious time to dry. I don't want to accidentally pull on something and it comes free. So actually I did this, I let it dry, I came back, I did the other side, and that's what's sort of off to the side now, is both sides have been glued on there with the magnets and ribbons. This is the Poinsettia die from Altenew. I'm not sure if it has a fancier name than that. It might. I'll link it below. I'm obsessed. I bought this thing on sale at the end of last holiday season and just hadn't gotten it out. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking, but I've now used this at least half a dozen times and probably will use it a dozen no more. It is so pretty. There are actually 4 pieces to the poinsettia. I should have probably just used all 4, but I did 3. I didn't want it to swamp the entire front. And I'm arranging the pieces and gluing them. I used my bone folder to just curl them up a little bit since it's not like this is a card that needs to mail flat. This will be like a Christmas purse gift bag, but it doesn't have to be. This is a different Altenew flower that I could stick in the corner. For a while here, I was thinking about sandwiching another magnet in there so you could swap out what was going to be there. This little gnome, he was too small, but that's from Spellbinders. I might try to make a smaller version of this that has the gnome, or maybe it's the gnome that comes with the ornament that swings. Maybe the ornament and the gnome would be big enough. Anyway, I've added my poinsettia to the front, and now I'm adding a couple little gold pearls. I think these are the Pink Fresh. They come in a bunch of different sizes in the same package. These are the smallest ones. There is a die in the poinsettia to cut. It's kind of interesting. It's got some embossed lines to make it look like you have all these little dots in the middle of the flower. But I thought this was really pretty. Once I got it on there, though, I wanted a little more gold. So this is a piece of 5.5 by 3 1/8 inch matte gold cardstock, and I'm scoring at 1 inch and then at 2 1/8 of an inch. If I hadn't embossed the panels on the front and back of the purse, I could have just done 1 inch score lines. That's what I did on the other 2 purses I showed you, but because I embossed the front and back panel at 1 inches, it didn't quite fit. I felt like the paper was bowing around the edges. So I'm adding, again, my construction glue. This is a pretty thin foiled cardstock, and so the solvent-based glue means I'm not adding moisture. It's not going to buckle by adding a lot of wet glue. So I'm adding that to the front, and then I'll burnish it down and try and remove the little bit of glue I smudged on the front. I was so mad. And then I'm adding some pieces to the end. So I've done the first one already, and then on the other side I'll do the same. I'm just adding a little bit of glue. It should have stuck with the other glue, but it didn't. And you can kind of see how that moisture changes the cardstock a little bit, but it's just the side. And if anybody's looking that closely, they can get over it. I'm lining it up with the gold on the front and back, and then once it sets a little bit, I'll just use my long scissors and trim off around it. I tried to do it on a different purse by like tracing and cutting it to size. It did not work nearly as well. This was pretty slick, and I was pretty happy with it. So this is our purse, and the 2 magnets here are strong, right? I have to kind of pry them apart, but I'm being really gentle here too. And it's pretty big. Like, that's my Altenew bone folder. You could fit a gift card. You could fit certainly some treats in there along with it. If you made a set of like mini note cards, they might fit. On this one, I used a smaller poinsettia from Spellbinders and rounded the corners. I used a little bit of handmade paper on the bottom along with some glittery washi tape to add a little sparkle. This other one has the same poinsettia but with different pieces, and I just love how these all turned out. I'm definitely going to be making more. If you like this project, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. I would really appreciate your support. And if the purse card comes up for Craft Roulette, hopefully this will help you out and give you some options. Thanks so much for joining me. I will see you next time.